All right, next on the show, we have a man who has traveled 3 million miles, probably trained tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of salespeople. He's got a watch collection. He's got the best fashion in the sales enablement game. Nate the Great Vogel, welcome to the show, my friend.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, honored to be here with you, man.
Yeah, excited. We were just chatting before this of how did we get here, and it all started with a conversation at the bar at Gong's P Club in what year was that? 2021 or
hmm
22
hmm
in Mexico, and here we are 3 or 4 years later, and it's been. I'll just say this at the forefront of this conversation. It's been an honor to meet you and learn from you, and you are truly a legend in the enablement and sales training world. So I'm just excited to have this conversation and get an unfiltered hour with you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And congrats, by the way. I remember that talk specifically being at a club in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And I think we're at the Four Seasons bar and sitting there, and you came up to me and said, "Hey, I want to get into enablement, do my own thing someday." And look at you. So congrats to you. And been fun to see your success. And obviously, honored to be on the call with you. And hopefully, to the listeners, hopefully pick up a few things.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Well, I want to get straight into it, and I always love hearing people's stories, how they get into sales. And when I do some LinkedIn homework, on your page, I see in college, Toastmasters. I see running different associations, maybe even running some sort of. It doesn't say explicitly like a sales club, but maybe oversaw salespeople in some sort of club before you get into Southwestern Advantage. So walk me through. You just a born seller at heart? Were you selling, chocolate bars on the playground? What's the deal here?
Yeah, maybe we could start even. Some people ask me, "What's your first sales job?" Me and my brother, twin brother,
Yeah.
sold lemonade at a lemonade stand in Missouri at a golf course. And I'll tell you a little bit about, and we did well, by the way. But my speaking of my brother, who is another funny person, but it was I think of 18 hole, and of the ninth hole, and in Missouri, it was super hot in the summer. So people, there was a water fountain there, and so I remember my brother would eliminate some of the competition because we'd say, "Hey, you want some lemonade?" And they're like, "No, we're fine. I get the water." And then he saw that we were losing, so he actually took the water fountain and jammed a bunch of rocks in it. So anyway, so they say, "No, I'm good. I'll drink some water." My brother's like, "Yeah, fine." Jason and they get water sprayed all over him. And he's like, "You want some lemonade?" So, anyways, we I think double our sales there. So that's my first sales job. But to your point, got into college and started really getting involved in clubs, and many of them were service clubs. That was actually the first club I got involved in. We actually created the first ever service club at college where we went out and do volunteer work, whether it's at the YMCA or go work for folks and clean up their yards that couldn't get in the yards anymore. So that was the first thing, and then I started getting into sales clubs and business clubs. But and I surely tell about Southwestern, but
Yeah. Was that on the service side and sales club? Like, I was in college. I love sales now. I was not starting any clubs, service clubs, sales clubs, doing any of that at that age. So was that ingrained in you as a kid? Were your parents in sales or business or service? Was it a sports thing? What was that upbringing like?
yeah, so my dad was in sales for a long time, and in fact, his dad and many family members. And then my mom was a teacher. She was a special education teacher for 40 plus years. So, ironically, in college, one of the first jobs that appealed to me was to work at Southwestern Advantage, and they're still around. They hire college students to sell educational books door to door, and you pay your way through school. You work 80 hours a week, and and many executives did that. And I actually got into tech for this reason, but one of the things that appealed to me about that program, and you can get college credit, was that you I was going to be selling educational books. So a mix of, my dad's expertise and then my mom's kind of educational component. So I thought that would be something worthy to go out and do, and that's actually part of what instilled the service club and doing some of those clubs. Is after that summer, I really started realizing and this is the servant kind of mentality beginning. The only way really was successful that summer is not trying to sell but serve, and just trying to solve families' needs and spend time with students, hear kind of how they're struggling with homework, and then we had a product to help with that. So even back then, 18, 19 years of age, I started realizing the true best salespeople were the best service minded people.
Yeah, you. I feel like you were mature for your age. So you
Yeah,
started
yeah,
when
not
you were
bad.
18 at Southwestern.
18, 18, yes, sir.
So you're a freshman in college and decide like, yeah, I want to. This seems interesting. Want to be like dad. Maybe want to make some money. And so what's actually saw a Southwestern car. I wish I took a picture driving around Chicago
That's right.
just last week, which stood out to me. So walk me through when you start. Like, what's the training like?
Yeah.
They just give you a zip code and you're just going door to door. What's that whole process?
No, yeah, and it's a good question. And by the way, the job, I actually, my twin brother, speaking of him, he actually had a job to do construction and actually make twice as much money.
Yeah,
But I thought to go out and get selling experience, be able to kind of be on your own. You sell in a different part of the country. So my first summer was in Texas. And no, kudos to them. I mean, this company's been doing this for 100 plus years. Everyone flies to Nashville or drives to Nashville, Tennessee, where the corporate headquarters is. And for a week, they train you. And so, and it's world class training. So, from discovery, prospecting, role playing, practicing, demoing. I mean, it's a tradition that's been a long time. And so, anyways, I ended up going to training school, then going to Texas for 3 months, and then made enough money to not only pay for school, but more importantly, I learned a ton, many of things what not to do and mistakes made. This is where data also started really. I started understanding data quite a bit more. Shirley was loved sports, played basketball, played pretty competitive basketball. Even as a kid, I remember studying baseball and football cards, seeing the data on the baseball, football back part of the card. So I
yeah.
could tell you statistics, but and even basketball in high school, I would study my competitors, you know, uh, numbers, and so I can know like, do they pass, do they shoot it more and pass, and so on. But when you become really involved in sales, a lot of that is a numbers game and data. So I can talk more about that. But ended up having a good first summer and actually coming back for 6 more summers as a student, including my twin brother, by the way, came out the next summer and he sold books
Yeah.
and paid his way through school. And we and was able to recruit other college students to do this. And this is part of the program. So I think when I graduated from university, I had 100 or so students working, in my sales organization. So early on. So, again, not only success, but also a lot of mistakes made early on to have, that type of not only sales experience, but sales leadership experience. And by the way, kudos to Southwestern training for leaders. So they, had to call great recruiter seminars. So every year we'd go back to Nashville um, and during the winter time and actually get trained on being a leader. So good for them. And, still a fan of that company and still a lot of friends from there.
So by the time you graduated school, you were leading a sales organization of 100 people. Is that right?
That's right. And in fact, it took me a little more time to graduate because I had such a huge organization.
Yeah. Because you're
Yeah, and
you're probably
so
work like that's a full-time job.
yeah, so this
More
is, and
than.
by the way, young people out there, don't do this. Mistake number one of the podcast. But I went fall semester and then took winter and spring off and recruited and trained. Went fall, took off winter and spring and summer. Went fall, finally graduated. So it's what made me not to do. My poor parents never thought I would graduate, but I did. I went to Western Washington University up here in a little bit north of Seattle here, but a great school. But it was tricky because I was balancing a large sales organization and obviously making really good money, but still being in school.
Would you have really not done that again though? I know it's like it's typical to just go through college in 4 years and do it that way and then get a job, but to me it feels like you got the experience. I mean, I know people that have been grinding in tech sales for 15, 20 years before they oversee a sales organization that large. So to get that opportunity when you're 21, 22 years old is insane to me.
Yeah, I think this is a beautiful part about this podcast, and one of the other themes I love saying is keep serving, keep learning. So keep learning. Maybe I think if my son, I would probably try to get him through school too as fast as I can. I think sometimes there's the fear of not finishing, and I easily could have done that, but I'm thankful I finished. But no question, I made a bunch of mistakes early on, and I think that helped craft my career later, because I, was able to kind of learn from experience at an early age, so then I could really master the craft of leadership later on. So I've been telling people I've been leading teams for 30 plus years, but I started it at 19 as a people leader.
Man, I don't believe you're 30 years older than 19. I was surprised to see
Wow,
that you were at Southwestern for 18 years when I looked at your LinkedIn, because
that's
you look
right.
like a young man here. But
Yeah,
uh,
I have a fake ID, Tom, that says I'm younger. You know how expensive that is? So, anyways, no, thanks for
that's
laughing at my joke.
that's hilarious. So walk me through some of those mistakes. I know learning and serving are the two of the key
Yeah.
components to you as a leader. That had to be really challenging as someone that's 21, 22, and has all of these other sellers around the same age making a lot of mistakes. Like, walk me through, what was that? How did you learn that serving was the key, and what were some of the maybe, missteps that you had early on in your career there?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, it's something easy to talk about. So, number one, I was a competitive athlete, and so to be competitive seller, you try to feel that those maybe are the same skill sets, but they're not. In some ways, you can't influence people or sell people hard or push them to do something. And so over time, I figured out as a seller that to fill a need, to promote value, to create a really awesome buying atmosphere, letting either customers say yes or no, try not to get a maybe. And so Southwestern, I think, taught that well. And then I realized, oh, it's easy for me to implement that, but then how do you teach sellers to implement that, or train and teach others to do it? And so luckily, as I had larger teams and was then recruiting and training, not just my twin brother, but other students that I didn't know, and then talking to their parents about, hey, they're going to go across the nation to like go to a different part of the country, and then they're gonna work at a job for 80 hours a week, and it's 100% commission, and there's no guarantees. And so you had to kind of sell the parents that they were going to be taken care of as best as possible. And so there was a lot of influencing, but I found that the value of kind of making sure that people understand, what problem we were trying to solve. So at Southwestern, we talked about all the things you're going to learn and all the ways you're going to grow and develop. In fact, the theme of Southwestern is still today building young character in young people since 1868. And so I
Hmm.
think anyone that worked at Southwestern, whether you made a bunch of money or not, there was a lot of character building. And so we talked a lot about that. Another
Yeah.
thing that I think I learned, which is around the power of leading by example. We used to have people sign a card, and this was a student manager creed, and we used to say, here's the things you can count on me for, and these are the things I'm going to do, and I'm never going to ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do, and then these are the things we're going to ask you to do. And so I really learned the power of modeling. And one of the things still today, but even my career in tech at Tableau, Salesforce, Gong, Databricks, and now Pigment, I'm really trying to teach leaders, including myself, the best way to influence is by modeling the right behavior. And
Hmm.
then people will watch it and shadow and see it versus telling. And so I have many other lessons, but I think early on, especially at Southwestern, I really learned the power of getting good leaders and mentors. And you can see that great modeling and that kind of, doing what you say you're going to do, or the student manager creed, as we called it, I think was really powerful. And you saw that some of the top performing teams, a lot of times the leader was modeling the right behavior, and then it was easy to follow.
Yeah. And so you spent 18 years there at Southwestern Advantage through college, and then, through however many years after college, building these teams, end up leading hundreds of salespeople, recruiting, training so many people. And then you listed off the companies that you've worked for since: Tableau, which got acquired by Salesforce, many people know, to Gong, to Databricks, to now Pigment. It's like this man can't miss. And I do want to cover some of that, because I think there's a bit
Sure.
of a skill in terms of, like, landing in a great place and helping to grow with a great culture. Those companies are, just all amazing businesses. But how do you take the jump from selling educational products door to door, Southwestern, to Tableau, which was, one of, at the time, the fastest growing most amazing culture, coolest products, especially in the Pacific Northwest, and then got bought by Salesforce for billions of dollars. Like that seems like quite the leap, to get into tech and quite a place to join. So how did that happen?
Yeah, and I'll never forget it. I remember literally coming, speaking of flying, so yeah, I've been with traveling all around the world with Southwestern, and I remember coming back from a flight, and I really wanted to start potentially getting into tech. I just had a special feeling I wanted to. My son was a year old. I wanted to potentially get off the road and maybe try to find a company where I could get into another phase of my career development. And so even at Southwestern, I was starting to implement some really cool tech, using video training and so on. But I remember flying home and there was a bunch of Microsoft people on the airplane. And I remember they were all, and they're wearing their backpacks and the Microsoft gear. And I thought, oh my gosh, they maybe don't dress that great. But I came home and I told my wife, I said, why I'm going to go work for a tech company. And when I told my wife that, she started laughing. She's like, you got to like know about technology. And I said, no, I'll learn that. And that was maybe another naive mentality, but a good mentality. I feel like I can learn things and I can keep learning. And so that idea of getting out of publishing into a total new business around tech. And then I started networking with my friends that were in tech. And one of them was Kelly Wright. And Kelly gets a lot of credit for my success in tech because Kelly worked at Southwestern Advantage and she worked 4 summers and she actually broke the company record for sales. And I broke the company record for recruiting. And so we used to say when we were younger, like, hey, it would be fun someday to work together again. And so one of the things I'll remember speaking to my son, it was my wife and I's first date away from my son. I think he was 4 months old at the time. We had dinner with Kelly and her husband Jeff, and that was the night she told me about Tableau. And she said, "Listen, you're gonna have to interview and study the technology, but you have such a great training background and a sales leader background." And one of the things she believed, and I still believe as a sales leader, it's for enablement that you've carried a bag, you've sold, you've trained. So that's what she said. Hey, she told me that night about Tableau. So I started doing research. And by the way, I started studying heavily on the product because back at Tableau, everyone in the interview process had to demo the product. And so I
Hmm.
remember studying massively. I'm not talking about a weekend. I mean, I think I studied 8 or 10 weekends in a row to kind of prep for this demo in the interview process. But thankful in 2012, I started at Tableau and it was still small, 500 people pre-IPO. And was honored to be there 9 years and help grow and develop that. And I'm very thankful that Kelly, brought me into Tableau and honored to serve with her.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for those that don't know, Kelly Wright, I think she was the first. Was she the first sales rep at Tableau?
First salesperson, employee 10. Yeah, and she rose
Wow.
through the ranks. And at the
Yeah.
time, she's the executive vice president. And now, she worked at Gong and now teaches. And I actually just spoke at her MBA course that she teaches here in Seattle. So, but maybe another takeaway for the listeners or a good reminder. I've always kidded. I think the best asset I have, besides maybe some of my fashion that I have in my closet, is my network, and I'm so 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 thankful. And so one of the things I try to do, by the way, is much as I can respond back to people and be active and just try to be a really good, servant-minded leader to help other people too. Because surely thankful that I stayed in touch with Kelly and thankful. And that obviously got lucky because of the 9 years at Tableau. 2 of those were with Salesforce, and thankful Dan Darcy, who's still a dear friend, and Dan was the head of Salesforce Enablement, and he took me under his wing for a couple years. And he's now chief customer officer at Qualified. By the way, we just bought Qualified, and they had Pigment, and so like there's this beautiful relationship that you have with people, and then Databricks, I knew quite a few people, executives there, obviously at Gong, and so thankful of my 2.5 year run at Gong running enablement, and then just joined Pigment, and ironically, Pigment, a bunch of Tableau executives are at Pigment, and for folks that don't know Pigment, they're a financial planning software out of Paris. But one of the reasons why I joined was one of the Tableau executives there named Jay Pear that I worked with very closely with joined Pigment about a year or two ago. And so that was helpful for me to influence me at Pigment. But it's, you can see the theme, really good leaders, people I trust, people I look up to, people that have mentored me. been thankful to then have so many great runs at these companies. But all these great companies, under the hood, you see there's just incredible people there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out to me about you, knowing, a handful of people that you worked closely with at Tableau, obviously being at Gong at the same time, knowing a bunch of people that you worked with at Gong, knowing some people that you worked with at Databricks, is the relationships that you create with the people that you work with. And you talked about mentors that you've had, and now you're a mentor to many people as well. And so you've got this whole list of people that are probably a little above you and a little below you in terms of like their time in the industry that have taught you and that you've taught. How do you keep tabs on all of those people and, keep that organized and stay in touch when you're also, working a very demanding job and have a family life and everything? Do you have any tips for people that wish they were a little bit better at that part of the, networking or just relationship building?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. Just, I'm a big, when you have books behind you, I have books behind me. I mean, great leaders are great readers. So I think, and by the way, great podcast listeners. And I'm studying. I've got my HBR articles right here, and I'm always studying up what different
Mm.
organizations, and just trying to study as much as I possibly can. So that keep learning, keep serving mentality is happening. And so one of the things I try to do, staying in touch with people, is I really believe in the slight edge theory. Another thing we talk about is Southwestern, and the slight edge theory, and I'm trying to teach this to my son right now, is if you do a little bit every day over a long period of time, it adds up. So I'm trying to teach him to be a better dribbler in basketball, and just do 5 or 10 minutes every day. So in the morning before school or surely after school, we just try to go out and practice dribbling a little bit, just a little. And then over a while, it really adds up. You can apply this to the Rule 72 for planning and investing money, eating healthy, walking, working out. So this concept of staying in touch with people. So I use my phone time, and I just try to, be on LinkedIn a lot. That's usually the platform I use, where I'm just constantly trying to, as best as I possibly can, try to just stay in touch with people. And it's not hours and hours, just a little bit kind of every day. And over time, especially over a few years, it really adds up. And, and thankful that hopefully I had a chance to impact people. And I hear this from people all the time, even recruiters, by the way, that pay me. I almost always try to get back to recruiters saying, hey, thank you, I'm not looking, but, send me the JD, let me know how I can help. I've got some great people in my network. A lot of times I'll jump on the recruiters, kind of hear what they're looking for, try to see if I can help my community, and thankful too when I'm looking, or other opportunities, sometimes that comes back to me too. But that slide edge theory, I think, makes a big difference. And a little tip out there for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. You talked about your son playing basketball. You've got your jumpsuit on, and
That's right.
I know that you view yourself really as a coach in a lot of ways. Probably personally and professionally. What do you think makes a great coach?
Yeah, and I think it's even getting in this, every time I join a podcast or something, I try to get in the mindset. So that's one reason I traditionally try to wear something a little bit more as a coach. And the reason why I say that, coaching, in my opinion, is teaching. And it's easy to direct, and maybe again, early lesson on, not just at Southwestern, but surely at Tableau and Salesforce. And then I started, as I watching other leaders, realize that many of them just slow down to coach, and ask their team's opinions, and before they speak, they ask their team's opinions. And even today, I'm trying to always say, hey, listen, I have some thoughts, but hey, to my team at Pigment, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I'm a big fan too of never doing anything alone. And so one of the things I try to do is always, if I can, have someone there with me, meeting with an executive, meeting with another department, having an executive review. I remember sometimes teams would say to me, like, why you have your whole team here? Now you have to be careful of their time, but I'm trying to coach and teach and influence. And one of the proudest parts of my job is it's so cool, of all those great companies I've listed, that folks that did enablement at Tableau, Salesforce, Gong, Databricks, and of course now Pigment, but for the four former companies, many of them are at those companies still, which I'm happy. It means they're doing well and being successful and using data-driven frameworks. And maybe we can talk about that if you like. but also many of them have dispersed into all these other great companies, and hopefully taking some of the things that we did and modeled. And now I think they're having, a huge influence on serving and influencing culture, and maybe talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah.
But that I think is a huge part. And by the way, you keep hearing service, service, service. What a great coach is someone that loves to serve and develop and really see the success. And one of the things I hope people, when someone says, "Hey, you worked up with Nate," I hope data comes out of their mouth pretty quickly. One of the hardest things I think in enablement is to use data to measure and showcase effectiveness. So that's one of the things I'm really proud of, but and through many mistakes made. But a lot of times you train on something and you enable on something, but the data says that 75% of most training and enablement is forgotten within 24 hours. And so how do you make sure and reinforce and influence behavior? And so, hopefully many of the enablement professionals are really pushing the data metrics. And I've gone on record, speaking to my family, my son's first word was data. My wife says it was daddy, but I was at Tableau, and I will say to you it was data. So I'm just all about measurement, making sure that our enablement professionals out there are really pushing the space on data and measurement.
Shout out
A great
to
coach is data
Nate's
driven,
son.
and
Yeah.
yeah. Make sure, last comment. Yeah, great coach and great teacher is teaching and making sure it's data driven.
Yeah. So let's talk more about data. Let's talk about enablement, for a second. I was sitting down with an enablement leader last week in New York, and we were just talking about, some of the trends that she sees. And, what dawned on me was when I started in sales, in tech sales, 10 years ago. I'm only speaking for my company, but a lot of the enablement people at that point, to me, it felt like they weren't former sellers, at least at my company. And a lot of it was like giving us some marketing content that we may or may not use. And I feel like there's been such an evolution in enablement that now it can be so sales focused and can be so like the difference I see between orgs that are truly enablement driven and the ones that are lagging there or don't even have anyone to help and support the team, it's leaps and bounds. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about what makes a great enablement team. You talked about data. I'd love to learn more about that. We're also now in the, obviously the AI age where that's very common. People are talking about that. And there's also different types of enablement. Are we talking about some of the sales skills and the kind of the softer skills, so to speak? There's product enablement. There's all sorts of ways to make sure that a salesperson is ready to go and representing the company well and achieving their targets and everything. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, but just the current state of enablement. What do you see? What do you think's important? How are you leading the team at Pigment?
Yeah, lots of thoughts obviously on that. I'll first just start by kind of going back to some of the fundamentals or basics around enablement philosophies. I'm a big fan, and another mistake made, and that was more at Tableau. But we did a lot of the training and enablement to the rep, and what I realized was in the team that I had helped on this, but was that if you don't train the leaders and managers, so let's use product training or let's use new messaging. Every company typically has messaging or positioning to differentiate their features and functions to show value. So you could do all this training to a rep, but if the manager, number one, doesn't coach to it and reinforce, or two, worse, is on a customer call and doesn't use the new messaging, then all the enablement we did was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Similar philosophy around partners. For Tableau specifically, we had a lot of partners out selling our solutions too. And so if you can master that the internal folks and the managers are trained, so the managers are modeling the right behavior. And again, reference some of this at Southwestern, the power of modeling and coaching. But then your partners are in an account and they're not saying the same thing. They're not trained. They're not messaging. They're not showcasing the differentiators. Then your customer is being confused. So that's why, again, I was a big fan at Tableau and Salesforce, and surely at Databricks too, around partner enablement. And we were doing a good amount of this at Gong, but I saw specifically at Tableau, Salesforce, and Databricks this huge partner ecosystem. And now, by the way, Gong's killing it at this. The power of that. And then at Pigment specifically, what we're realizing, and I think this is a new trend, is customer enablement. And so now what an honor at Pigment, where I can not only lead sales enablement, partner enablement, but also this education enablement. And so this idea that let's go back to the messaging, and we're doing this real time here at Pigment. We created some new messaging, partnering with many cross-functional teams within the company. We created some differentiators so our customers and prospects knew our value. Pigment was just announced, visionary in the Magic Quadrant, and we're doing all these different unique things with our product and AI. So we train the sellers, we train the leaders first, we train our partners. But what's really typically a gap is then customers buy, and then the users that get in the education part or the community, or they're actually going through a lot of the product training, now they're customers. If that new messaging isn't being reinforced and showcased, then there's a little bit of confusion. So I do think this is a big trend coming, and an honor that we're really leading and modeling this here at Pigment, so we can make sure our sellers are trained, our partners are trained, and more importantly, now our customers will be trained and being really educated. So I think this is the evolvement of the space. That's kind of major meta point. One other major meta point, and McKinsey Consulting, and by the way, Gong gets a lot of credit for this too, and the work that you and I were doing there. The McKinsey consultant has some good data around 70% of large strategic transformational initiatives usually fail. Most companies will have, these new initiatives at the start of the year, product training, competitive training. A lot of times this was launched at sales kickoffs over the years. And over time, many of those either weren't reinforced, didn't see a big return of investment. You didn't actually see a big movement in market share or competitive win rates. And so I think Gong really gets a lot of credit. And by the way, I'm a huge Gong fan.
Shout out to Gong.
I've not erased my Gong tattoo. I think it's one of the best technologies out there for enablement professionals, sales operational professionals, sales leaders to really see what's happening. And so one of the things of those strategic transformational initiatives, why they fail a lot of times, is that adoption and reinforcement. And the thing with Gong what I love, and still doing this, by the way, huge at Pigment, was we're able to really showcase what's happening post enablement. In other words, we've enabled the whole field. By the way, it's happening real time right now at Pigment. We trained everyone in Paris at sales kickoff this year. We train all of our partners. We had all these great conversations now being recorded. Now we're starting to see even every single differentiator. We talk about zero learning curve. We're talking about agentic AI, part of our feature that we have at Pigment. We're talking about elastic canvas, things that we can do that none of our competitors can do. We can actually see it in Gong and measure it. So this is it's not something that I think a lot of enablement teams haven't mastered yet. But I think there's other great technologies that are tools out there, especially AI tools. By the way, we're using another tool called Udily, really great AI tool for coaching. And so it's an actual tool that a rep, and we're trying to get partners to do the same. Let's say you learn this new messaging. Before you maybe go coach to it or be trained by your manager or maybe a certification, you can use Udily role plays where you can practice. And so speaking of basketball analogies, like instead of me out dribbling with my son can go dribble with an AI. This is a little bit, probably happening, but an AI can coach him on his dribbling, and then I can coach him, and then his coach can coach him. But so that's what's really fun about enablement right now. The space is so exciting because there's such great technologies out there to help increase productivity. But all of these are enablement trends, and these are all, I think, really, big topics that are being discussed for enablement professionals out there. And again, the keep learning is still happening. I still got to be studying. I got my books here. I got my magazines here. I'm trying to continue to study the technology out there to continue to keep learning.
So with all of that going on, how do you make a decision on where to put your time and energy, when you're looking at different tools, when you're looking at partners versus customer education versus the new talk track around agentic AI? How does someone like yourself make that priority?
Maybe this goes to my earlier comment. I mean, I'm a huge fan of scale, and maybe mistake made at Southwestern early on. I figured, okay, I can learn this, but how do I get my team to learn it? And then I was like, well, how do I get managers of managers to learn it? And when I had a 300 person sales org across multiple states and different countries and different languages, and this is where the traveling and blessed that I've trained in over 30 different countries. Training in South America is different than training in Europe, and potentially training in parts of the US and different languages. And even when I had the honor to go down to Tokyo, by the way, shout out to all the folks of fashion, one of my favorite city in the world. But I really learned that, hey, I could train on this, but I learned that, hey, I've got to have the president of Tableau kick off this session to show respect and honor, and then I would train on it and have an actual interpreter. So there's tips and tricks within different countries, but I'm a big fan of scale, scale, scale. To answer your question, then I'm a big fan of frameworks. So one of the things I'm about is, and I think the hopefully the enablement teams that I've had a chance to serve with, that we think through frameworks. So making sure you train managers first. And I remember, in a few interviews, I would hit this part about, you got to have manager first mindset enablement. And everyone's like, oh, that's great. Good idea. And then I remember joining a company, and I won't call out the company. About 2 months into it, I said, okay, this is a really important product release. So funny. Look, by the way, who's calling me? Roxy from Gong, right?
Oh,
Real
wow.
time. So she's going to be
Shout
on
out
our
to Roxy
podcast.
live.
Yes,
Let's
yeah,
answer it
exactly.
live.
So what an honor. We're still trying to stay in touch with former enablement people. By the way,
I love
she's
it.
really good. Um, but frameworks. So this idea that, how can we teach to it, scale to it, make sure that we're like showcasing this. But again, I'll reference this company. I had this idea that, hey, train your managers. I get there 2 months in. I say, okay, now it's time to train our managers. And I remember the president of the company said, well, wait a minute, that's 400 frontline managers that you're going to pull up the field for an hour. I said, exactly.
Hmm.
And we did that. And I now think that's a motion that's consistent. And so, this idea that you had that in a framework will say, well, and I surely Tableau gets a lot of credit for this too. We said, okay, we believe partners are important. We believe partners are scale. So 80% is the goal of internal sales training. Let's make sure partners get. And so when you have a framework, you say, okay, if you have new messaging. So I remember when we had new features being released at Tableau, we would say plus partners. And then we'd scramble and say, okay, well, shoot, we got to get legal to approve this, to then make sure we can train the partners. So then the internal team gets trained, then our partners gets trained in advance of the announcement that goes to our customers. And so this framework concept, I think, is super important. You say, well, if the partners are trained, and then again, let's make sure our customers are trained. And they're like, well, wait a minute. We know that most enablement people forget 75% the next day. We know how important it is to model. Do we have a reinforcement plan? Do we have Gong in place and all the trackers set up to measure? So again, this framework concept, then it starts getting a little easier because you kind of know where to start. So, and Shirley can go in much more depth around building instructional design content for people that can, have quizzes and other trainings that we call micro learnings. And think we did this well at Tableau, Salesforce, Databricks, Gong, and Pigment. But how do you take kind of micro 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute learnings? Databricks did really good at this. And don't get any credit for it, but the team built like brick bites and these little trainings that was really easy for the field to digest. And again, slide edge theory, a little bit over a long period of time really adds up. And I hear this all the time. Let's do training. And they're like, oh, let's train everyone for 90 minutes on product. And I'll say to people, let's train everyone 90 minutes with 8 different sessions, in little 12-minute sessions over the next few weeks versus a 90-minute section. So anyway, so we can go a little deeper on that, but there's a lot of really good best practices out there. And, and I think myself and the team is leading on this, but also I'm consistently learning, going to the Seattle Sales Enablement Collective organization next month. I'm honored to be on a panel, but we're all learning and learning from each other and seeing what's best practices out there. And so even being blessed to be in the space for a long time, I still have to model and learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And big believer in that, in habits, like trying to turn this into a habit, the continued learning, the continued reinforcement. I want to do a pivot here to a few rapid fires for you, just keeping
Oh,
my eye on the
cool.
clock, Nate.
Sure.
So we're going.
Love it.
Yeah, he's moving around in his chair.
All right, let's get my get
We
my
didn't prep Nate on
that's
this.
right. Here we go.
All right, so we'll give you a softball to start off with. So when you're throwing the headphones in, you throw on Spotify or whatever you're listening to music. What's going through the Nate Vogel headphones?
Yeah, and my son's trying to influence this, I promise you. But I love jazz, by the way. So if I need to
Okay,
relax, big jazz fan. Most people might not think about that. Chet Baker is my greatest artist for jazz. And by the way, I'm Seattle based, so Pearl Jam probably going to get right in there. And that's probably right up there as some of my top lists.
love it. What about we talked a lot about learning. So any key books that greatly impact you? I know there's a few behind you that
Yeah.
impact you or that you recommend when you're working and serving with people.
There's yeah, and I've got a bunch. So I'll just rapid fire. So, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I didn't read
Mm.
that book for 13 years because I thought the title was cheesy. I didn't want to win friends and influence people by Dale Carnegie, but it's absolute. I've read it over and over and over again. There's some really good lessons learned there. Big Simon Sinek fan. It's one of the books behind me. Leaders Eat Last. Really good book around servant mentality. The great Harvard Business Review. There's a lot of digital content out there, but I read that every single month, page to page. I like having the I mean, I like having the physical copy. But those are some of the great, just real time books that and kind of publications I like.
Anything that you do outside of work to, avoid burnout, recharge, any physical activities, hobbies, anything like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, one, I love coaching, so what an honor, and I guess to start thinking and smiling about this. But coaching my own son's basketball team, so this year I had a chance to do that. I did it a few years ago, so just love coaching, and it's so applicable to many of the topics we did today. Even modeling, had the honor to teach these kids some of these things, and I had to model some, and the other coach did too. Like, so we tell a student, kid, hey, when the ball's on the ground, like, get on the ground and get on the floor and hustle to get that ball. And so coach and I modeled it. We probably shouldn't do that anymore, but it was
You're
kids were
diving for
laughing at us
loose
because, like,
balls.
dang, our coaches are like on it. So I'm a big, I love design. And so a hobby is just, when I say fashion, I just love design. Always have. I mean, I even remember reading GQ in high school. Maybe it's my Italian roots. I love traveling, not only with obviously my family, but for work. And so, you just learn so many things. I remember, seeing the Berlin Wall, being able to see the Sistine Chapels in Rome, being able to see, Tokyo and some of the great buildings and obviously fashion. Rio, Brazil was breathtaking. I just go on and on. Paris, by the way, one of my favorite cities in the world. So I love design. I mean, airplane. First time I went on the Dreamliner airplane, the flight attendant had to have me sit down because I was so fascinated. I love watches, cars, architecture. I get really inspired by it, and it helps me also remind me to be creative.
Mm. Uh, you beat me to the punch. I do want to ask a fashion question because you're always, if anyone checks you out on LinkedIn, you're always, looking fly as hell. Anytime you're traveling to see people, I've obviously, if people are watching on YouTube, they can see the lovely jumpsuit, the watch, the nice little background you have behind you. Is it just like you're genuinely interested in it, or is there any sort of like psychological, I want to look good, feel good, play good, dress for the job you want, is there any of that, or is it just like you truly just see that as a passion and you get kind of a kick out of new fashion and looking good and a nice watch?
Yeah, geez, I know no one's ever asked me that question that way, but it's probably a mix of both. I mean, I remember again in high school reading GQ back in the day when like no one read GQ, but I really liked fashion. Always have. But my wife was a fashion designer. Maybe that appealed to her. By the way, she said I was the first guy she ever did not have to dress. So maybe that helped. Maybe helped attract that there. But no, I think I'm generally interested. I always have been. I remember going to Rome, Italy, and seeing the fashion there first time at Rome. I just could, I just loved it, and so that's where I started really loving. And I think materialistic and loving fashion is an important differentiator. I'm trying to teach this to my son too. So it doesn't have to be expensive. Fashion and style and confidence and what you curiously are you're interested in. And I've really felt like I've stayed true to that. And so I think especially people have come up to me and said, I love that you're just you and authentic and you give me permission to be myself.
Mm.
And that's one of the things I've always loved about kicking off new hire training or boot camps when people join a company, because I really feel that I can be, whether it's on a podcast or one-on-one, or been blessed to be in front of 12,000 people at Tableau customer conference as the MC,
Man.
you kind of see it's the same person. And I really pride myself on that. And fashion is a good component of it. Thanks for
Yeah.
asking.
You're the first. You're my first ask if we ever throw a TA sales large conference. You're the first ask on the MC list. All right, I've got two more quick ones for you.
Yes, sir.
Number one, we bring it to the selfish section of the podcast where I ask who else needs to come on this podcast. But the caveat is, if you name the person, we're going to use your name, and/or we might need your help to get them. So you can't just throw out, Mark Benioff if you're not going to help me get him.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I've just shared a few mentors, so we'll go enablement and maybe some sales leaders. So Dan Darcy, real time thought, was one of the first icons that Salesforce really built out the function. Bill, friend, mentor, looked up to him tremendously. Thankful for 2 years he took me under his wing. I thought our team was large at Tableau. I had 80 enablement people at Tableau when I left. And when we got acquired, Salesforce had 300. I know that's changed with AI, and some of that is the way the way it's worked. But Dan is amazing. Now he's a customer facing. I think he would be really amazing. So that's a kind of enablement shout out and professional for sure. I think a sales leader, or probably someone that would be willing to join, is Kelly Wright. Again, go back to Kelly.
Yeah.
I mean, you know her from Gong, and she's a really big component of culture-driven sales. And she's just all about culture and people. And so I think she would be absolutely amazing to bring on. I have a bunch more, but I would, maybe start with those two, and obviously did a bunch of shout outs to them already.
Yeah. Amazing. We'll take the rest offline. Nate, I want to be mindful of your time. I appreciate you coming on. Before we ask the last question and where people can reach you, there's a Nate Vogel signature pose, and I'm gonna request we hit the pose together, and that could be the thumbnail here for the people that are checking this out on YouTube. All right.
Well, yeah, and I stole this because I've always remember, traveling, we had these pictures and people just look bored and they smile and it looks unauthentic. So I kind of came with this idea. Maybe this is the closing comment around serving and being authentic. And so, yeah, the pose is simply just say, hey, man, life is good. Let's have fun. Let's enjoy this. Let's help everyone. So you want to do the pose as the close?
Yeah, let's do it as a little 3, 2, 1 closer.
It's a little tricky sometimes, but you kind of just got to point. Maybe it's just an authentic. You see my LinkedIn. Yeah, you don't have to lean back. Don't want you to hurt yourself. You can do thumbs up. The point has been more like, hey, life is good. We're doing all right. So
yeah. All right. Well, before we do the point, want to just thank you publicly.
Of course.
You're the best. Everyone go hit up Nate on LinkedIn. Let him know what you thought of this episode. He's probably hiring. If he's not, he probably knows somewhere you get hired, and he's the absolute best. So we'll close it off with this little pose here.
Thank you, Tom. An honor to be on here with you, and proud of you, and honored to help out there for the listeners. Anything I can do to help serve, I'm here to help. Okay, we'll do it. Ready?
All right, 3, 2, 1, pose. Julia, clip this. All right, that should be good. Appreciate you, Nate. Thanks for coming on, man.
You bet. Helpful.